Hey everyone, and welcome to a brand new video. Tonight we have 2 hours of horror stories with no mid-roll ads. I hope you all enjoy them. If you do, please be sure to drop a like rating. Let's see if we can reach 1,000 likes on this one. I think if everybody took just a quick second, we could do it. Also, dropping a like just helps more people see the content. Subscribing if you are new is also very much appreciated, as I post content just like this all of the time. Anyways, sit back, do whatever it is that you do to relax, enjoy the stories right after the ad break after this intro. There won't be any more ad breaks after that one. And as always, I hope you all have a great night. Paid hitchhiker, $150 per hour, 2-hour nights, Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 p.m. I did the math in my head, about $6,500 a month. Not bad. As that thought sank in, I realized studying music theory had probably been a mistake. Still, I decided to reply to the listing. I answered a few questions, attached my resume, though I wasn't sure what good that would do, and hit send. Almost instantly I got a response. I'd half expected that. I couldn't imagine many people jumping at this position. Thank you for your interest in the hitchhiking position. We're excited to invite you to move forward with the interview process, and we look forward to getting to know you professionally. I typed back quickly. Thanks for reaching out. I'd be glad to move forward with the interview. What dates and times work best for you? The reply came moments later. Friday, followed by a set of coordinates. I plugged them into Google Maps. The destination was a small building on a long road in the middle of a forest. On street view, the place looked distorted, almost blurred. All I could make out was a sign. No soliciting, no religion, no unscheduled meetings. It was Wednesday then. I tried to convince myself I didn't need the money, that it wasn't worth the risk. But the truth was, I did need the money. Badly. I was drowning in debt, and every last dollar would help. By Friday night, I was in my beat-up car, headed toward the coordinates. When I arrived, I saw the rest of the building the street view had obscured. It was larger than I'd imagined. 2 stories and a basement, the latter revealed by the rows of windows sunk into the foundation. The whole place was gray concrete, punctuated by thin sheet metal doors. I tried the front door. Locked. Knocked. No answer. So I sat on a wooden bench about 15 feet from the entrance and waited. It was 7:30, the forest nearly pitch black, when 2 pairs of headlights appeared on the driveway. From one car stepped a tall man with thinning black hair. From the other, a scrawny kid, maybe 19 at most. The tall one approached first. "Hello, my name is Jeffrey." "Devin," I replied. "This is your partner, James." "Partner?" I asked. I glanced at James. He was gripping his right bicep tightly with his left hand. When he noticed me looking, he released it, raised a hesitant hand in greeting. I waved back with an awkward smile. "Yes," Jeffrey said evenly. "Your partner." After a long silence, he added, "Shall we head inside?" I nodded, and we followed him in. The interior was exactly what I'd pictured. Bare concrete walls, dim light, and a single desk in the middle of the room. Jeffrey took a seat, and James and I sat opposite him. "Can I ask you both a question?" Jeffrey said, pen poised above a sheet of paper. We nodded. "What was the most scared you've ever been?" I hesitated, hoping James would answer first. He didn't. "My house was broken into when I was 16, I said, giving a small, nervous laugh at the end. Jeffrey scribbled something down, then he turned to James. "I don't know," James muttered. Jeffrey studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Very well. Shall we get you both suited up?" We exchanged a glance and answered, "Sure." He led us to a small room with a closet and 2 changing booths, handing me a bag of ragged, tattered clothing. He gestured for me to change. Inside the booth, I slipped into the clothes. They looked filthy, but smelled surprisingly clean. When I stepped out, I saw James. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, spotless and elegant. We stared at each other in confusion. Jeffrey just grinned, wide and satisfied. "Perfect," he said. "Devin, follow me, please. We'll need to touch up on your look a bit more." He guided me toward another door leading down to the basement. At the center of the room stood a red vanity table, stocked with makeup. "Sit," Jeffrey instructed. I sat, staring at myself in the mirror. I wondered how on earth I'd ended up here. Jeffrey went to work with brushes and sponges, moving with the ease of experience. When he finished, my reflection looked ragged. My face dirtied, hair greasy, eyes sunken. We went back upstairs. "Your turn," Jeffrey said to James. James descended into the basement as I waited. When he reappeared, his transformation was startling. His hair was neatly combed, his skin glowing, his eyes an unnatural bright blue. Contacts, I guessed. Jeffrey clasped his hands together. "Now, a few rules before you head out." He recited them one by one. "Never enter the black truck, even if it seems like your last hope. If you ever see a man identical to yourself, get into the car, nod to him, and exit immediately. If the radio is set to 99.3, get out of the car, no matter how fast it's moving. Never allow your driver to pick up another hitchhiker." "Everything clear?" We both nodded. "Wonderful. Please, follow me." He led us to his car, opening the front passenger seat and one of the back doors. James hesitated, so I took the front. "We'll head to your site first, James," Jeffrey said. "Okay," James murmured. We drove through darkness and silence until a bench appeared by the roadside, identical to the one I'd waited on earlier. "Your stop," Jeffrey said. James stepped out, sat on the bench, and stuck out his thumb. "Onwards to your site," Jeffrey told me. As we drove, I finally asked what had been nagging at me. "Why did James get the nice makeover? Wouldn't I be better suited to play the businessman? I mean, the kid's a twig." Jeffrey ignored me at first, eyes fixed on the road. Then he smiled, put the car in park, and leaned over to pop open my door. "Remember to tell them to bring you right back to the building," he said. "You didn't tell James that," I pointed out. "Don't worry," Jeffrey replied. "He knows." I figured he'd gone over more rules with James during his makeover. I stepped out and sat on the bench. About 30 minutes passed before I saw headlights. I stuck my thumb out, but the car flew past, not even slowing. 10 minutes later, the woods behind me stirred. At first, just rustling, then twigs snapping, something pacing, circling, the sound of deliberate movement, closer each time I ignored it, and then the black truck arrived. It didn't appear down the road like a normal vehicle. It was there, headlights already blazing, horn already screaming. The air itself seemed to vibrate from the sound. The beams of light blinded me, catching every raindrop, every speck of dust in their glare. I shielded my face as the truck crept toward me. The horn blared again, long, metallic, almost animal in howling pitch. "Get the hell in," a voice shrieked from inside. Not one voice, but dozens, layered over each other, all mismatched in tone but perfectly in unison. Through the windshield, shadows moved violently, like a crowd crammed into a space meant for one driver. Faces slammed against the glass, mouths wide, eyes wide, distorted. I couldn't breathe. My legs felt like they were tied down, every instinct screaming at me to run, but I stayed rooted. The truck edged closer, engine rumbling, horn stabbing through the night again and again. "Get in, get in, get in." The forest behind me fell silent. as if whatever had been lurking stepped back to give the truck room. I sat perfectly still, fingers digging into the bench. I don't know how long it lasted. Time felt suspended, the horn pressing into my skull like a migraine. Finally, the headlights clicked off. The voices stopped. The truck was gone. No sound of an engine retreating, just gone. I was alone again. Another 20 minutes passed before I saw the next car. It crawled along the road at an unnatural pace, 15 miles per hour at most. No sound of an engine, just tires crunching gravel. When it reached me, the driver's window rolled down, and I saw myself. Not just a resemblance. Me. Identical down to the tattered clothes, the smeared makeup, even the way I hunched forward on bad posture. His eyes locked on mine. He didn't smile, didn't wave, just waited. The silence was unbearable. I walked toward the car, my stomach flipped, but I couldn't stop. I opened the passenger door, stepped in, and sat. We didn't speak. He didn't look at me again. He simply tapped the wheel twice with one hand, like a signal. I nodded back, throat tight. The moment I closed the door, he pressed the gas, the car jolting forward with impossible speed. But after no more than 100 feet, he braked, and I knew, get out. I opened the door, stepped into the night, and the car was already gone. No taillights, no trace, just emptiness where it had been. I exhaled shakily, realizing I'd been holding my breath the whole time. Finally, a normal car appeared. The driver leaned out. "Where to?" "Just up the road," I said quickly, desperate to leave. For a moment, I panicked. I hadn't checked the radio. My head snapped toward it. 112.7. Safe. Relief washed over me like air after drowning. On the way back, the driver squinted at the roadside. "Jesus, what happened to that guy?" he muttered. I followed his gaze and my heart collapsed. James. He was sprawled out in the gravel, one arm twitching weakly, blood spreading in a dark halo beneath him. His white shirt, once perfect, was soaked red. His face was pale, slack, but his eyes were still open, still alive. "Stop the car," I yelled. The driver slowed, uneasy. "I don't know, man." "Stop." I threw the door open before the car even halted, stumbling onto the shoulder and running to him. James, it's me." He turned his head with visible effort, his lips trembling like he was trying to form words. A wet cough sprayed crimson down his chin. His hand shook as it reached towards me. I gripped it tight, but his grip was ice cold, already fading. He coughed, body shuddering. "Don't let them." His eyes darted toward the trees as if something was watching us. Then back to me, wide and terrified. "Promise me." I promise. I said, though I had no idea what he meant. His chest rose once more, then faltered. His body went slack. Nothing. Just the trickle of blood running downhill, soaking into the gravel. Behind me, the driver called out nervously, "Hey man, we should go. Seriously, we should go." I pressed James' hand to my chest one last time before laying it down. My own hands were trembling so badly I could barely stand. Tears blurred my vision as I staggered back to the car. I didn't speak for the rest of the ride. When Jeffrey greeted me back at the building with his usual cheer, I could barely contain myself. "Did you see James?" he asked lightly. "He's dead," I snapped, voice cracking. Jeffrey only tilted his head, almost like he was amused. "Oh, what a shame. Don't stay the night." "That's it? That's all you have to say?" "I told you not to worry about your partners, Devon. It does no good." I wanted to scream at him, but the words died in my throat. Instead, I turned and left. The drive back home was silent. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, James' last words echoing in my head. The forest road stretched endlessly, a tunnel of black trees pressing in on both sides. That's when I saw him, a lone figure on the shoulder, illuminated in my headlights. He was filthy, long, tangled beard, patchy, buzzed scalp, and clothes that looked like they'd been torn to shreds weeks ago. He was already standing with his thumb out, arm stiff like it had been raised for hours. I slowed instinctively. Something about him made my stomach twist. His eyes glinted in the light, too sharp, too deliberate. I pressed on the gas, deciding to pass him. The moment I did, his head snapped toward me. His eyes followed my car perfectly, his body jerking into motion. He ran. I glanced in the mirror and nearly swerved. The man was sprinting after me, barefoot, stumbling, but impossibly fast. His mouth hung open, teeth bared, and his voice carried through the trees. "Coward," he bellowed, the word ragged, broken by wheezes. I floored it, but his voice didn't fade. "Coward, you'll end like the rest." I couldn't stop shaking. My speedometer climbed, but still, his figure clung to the road in my mirror longer than it should have. Too long, until finally, after what felt like a mile, he was gone. The forest swallowed him, but his voice lingered in my ears like static. "Coward, coward, and like the rest." By the time I got home, my hands still hadn't stopped trembling. I went to bed without changing, face pressed into the pillow, heart pounding. 2 months passed. Jeffrey replaced James again and again, but none lasted longer than a week. Some came back bruised and broken. Others simply didn't come back at all. Jeffrey never flinched. He only smiled, adjusted his notes, and prepared another partner. And I kept returning, night after night. Each ride gnawed away at me. The rules ran laps in my head even when I was home, as if the job followed me there. Tomorrow night, I've decided. I'm going to talk to Jeffrey about quitting. I've already rehearsed how I'll say it. Firm, polite, like it's just a simple resignation. I hope he understands. I'm sure at least some people will relate to this. My childhood was odd. At the time, I couldn't see that there was anything wrong with it. I couldn't understand it when things happened that weren't normal. I went to school, had friends, and played games like any other kid. I had loving parents and an annoying sister, just like many other kids my age did. My grandparents, aunts, and uncles would often visit. I didn't like when my grandmother came. She was a strict woman and, honestly, she scared me. I can remember vividly one summer she came over. She looked my sister and I up and down, then turned to my father and asked, "What about the other one? I thought you said get it over with and end this farce." He pulled her aside and told my sister and I to go play outside. She left that night and never came to visit again. There were so many things that I never learned should be questioned. I never comprehended that they were something I should question. Most of them felt small at the time. We had a picture of our family tree in our hallway, a long line of sibling pairs as far back as anyone remembered, and yet by each of them was space for a third. My mother would bring in extra groceries every trip, and sometimes set an extra plate at dinner, then quietly put it away again. But there was one rule that we were never to break. We weren't allowed to speak at home. Rather, we weren't allowed to raise our voices above a whisper. Whether in anger, laughter, or even by accident, loudness in general was treated as taboo as soon as we set foot on the driveway. On the few occasions we raised our voices, our father's anger always fell hardest on me. My sister cried, but she was spared. I didn't understand why my mother never comforted either of us until much later, and it cost me far more than I would have been willing to trade. I really want to emphasize that this was always the norm to me. I didn't understand what it meant. I didn't know I should be worried or scared. Despite this, like I mentioned earlier, I did have a good childhood. My parents truly loved us both, and it was rare that we got into trouble. I had a lot of friends at school, and I'd often spend the majority of my day at one of their houses, playing PS2 or taking advantage of their trampoline, which I had always been envious of. My dad didn't like it. Anytime I wanted to get permission for a play date or a sleepover, I would ask my mom. This would be followed by tense, coarse whispers between the two of them in their room. Sometimes they'd let me, other times not. Hindsight truly is a taunting thing. I can't tell you how many nights I've spent lying awake wishing my dad had won those hushed arguments. I wish to myself as I toss and turn that I hadn't been born to my parents, that I hadn't been born at all. But even more vicious than hindsight is the past itself. It stands with absolute resoluteness. It is unchangeable and unforgettable, a wound that never heals until the day the afflicted passes away. Siblings are supposed to be mean to each other when they're young. It's part of how they grow up, how they learn social skills. So when my friend suggested that we scare my sister during a sleepover, I was immediately on board. I wasn't allowed to have friends over at our house, but I told them I could record it all and show them the next day. I was beyond excited to have something to rub in my sister's face. She was the eldest, and I wanted to get the upper hand on her for once. As any little girl would, she screamed when she saw the rubber snake under her pillow. It wasn't a long scream. She covered her mouth with her hands almost as soon as it left her lips. But it was enough. There was a moment of silence right after she screamed that felt never-ending. Then my parents ran into the room. They saw her, mouth still covered and eyes wide with terror. Then the toy snake on her bed. My father cursed under his breath before scooping up my sister into his arms. My mother looked like she was going to cry. Her eyes darted down even before the noises began. Scratching. Something was scratching the wooden floor underneath our feet. Light at first. Soft. Almost as if it was asking to be let in politely. Then louder. Louder and louder until it was violently clawing away at the wood like tissue paper. The boards bent first, bowing upward as if the house itself were breathing. Then they split, splinters flying, and something began to crawl through. When my father saw what had emerged from below our feet, he set my sister down and stepped away. All he said was, "I'm sorry." He didn't sound angry. He didn't sound afraid, just tired, like he'd been waiting for this, as if he had expected it. It was small. We had raccoons in our backyard that my sister and I would try to catch. At that moment, that's the only size comparison that I could think of. It crawled on its hands and knees, bloated and red as if its skin was being pulled taut over too much of its own body. A putrid, fleshy cord dangled over its shoulders, coiling around its neck before disappearing into its own swollen belly. How could something so sickly, so small, be so strong? Its eyes locked onto my sister and I jumped between the two. My mother cried out, "No!" Before either of my parents could move, the rotten child seized my ankle and hurled me across the room as if I were a toy soldier. I hit the wall and my mom came to pick me up, both shielding and restraining me. But even if I had broken free, it wouldn't have mattered. In seconds it had her. My sister's nails scraped across the floorboards. Her muffled cry cut short as the thing dragged her into the hole below. I heard her scream again, but this time it wasn't her hands that silenced it. The sound of flesh being torn from sinew, ligaments snapping, bones breaking. Then her voice called again. "Mom, Dad." It pulled itself back up from the darkness. The sight of it now forced me to vomit on the floor. It was bigger, but wrong. Its arms and legs were uneven, its hands a clutter of mismatched fingers, as though it had been playing with bones the way a child plays with toys, jamming them into place, trying to look like my sister. Patches of her brown hair sprouted from swollen red skin, clumps of it slick with blood. Her white teeth were crammed into its gray gums, sharp and uneven, like butcher knives buried in raw meat. But worst of all were the eyes. They were her eyes. I could still see the fear they held only moments ago, the betrayal and terror she had experienced. My father scooped my sister up in his arms and carried her out of the room. I could hear the monstrous, joyful cries as she tried to use her new, stolen voice. The rest of my childhood was spent pretending the monster had always been my sister, pretending that her laugh was hers, that her smile was hers. I was punished more harshly for mistreating her than I ever was for breaking the rule of silence. I moved out when I turned 16 and continued my game of pretend. I pretended my childhood never happened, that I was a normal man with a normal past and a normal family. Only one thing brings me comfort now. No matter how much my parents beg and plead and yell and berate, I will never have children. This ends with me, and it ends with her. I'm not a writer. This isn't for a book or a blog. This is a warning, and if you're reading this, it means you might need it. And it starts on a stretch of road you don't take at night. The one that snakes through the old forest. Outsiders have been going missing on that stretch of road, and worse. I'm convinced the locals have something to do with it. But I know now. I know what happens to anyone that does not wave. I moved into this cozy little apartment a short while ago. I never planned on staying long. My professor asked me to study the area for scientifically interesting flora, botany PhD stuff. I'd done a few rounds in the area, but nothing struck me as interesting. The only place I hadn't been to yet was the forested road to the north. The locals seemed oddly eager for me to go there. A nice place to get lost in nature, they told me. Promised me I'd find all kinds of things worth studying. But their smiles felt too wide, their insistence too strong. But I tricked myself into thinking it was just a small town thing, and I very well couldn't go back with half a report. So, at first light, I packed the car and drove up. I can't say I noticed anything unusual. The wind in the trees, birds were singing. A squirrel hopped from branch to branch. I didn't really know what I was expecting. I gathered my equipment and began a survey of the area, collecting specimens, taking photos, scribbling notes, etc. I had just finished my last collection when I noticed that the daylight was quickly vanishing. Had I really been out here that long? I glanced at my wrist, but my watch had clearly stopped. I took out my phone, but it was dead. I lied to myself. My watch has been on its way out for weeks, and my phone always drains quickly when I take pictures. Nothing felt right. I started walking back to my car. That's when I saw it. A sign. It was a weather-beaten wooden diamond. The paint a faded, sickly yellow that was peeling at the corners. It didn't stand out. If anything, it seemed to sink into the gloom, almost like it wasn't meant to be noticed. On it was a black silhouette with what appeared to be two small children, holding hands and waving. Beneath it, half hidden by grime, was a simple yet strange message. Waving children, please wave back. I began to smile at the absurdity of it. Who puts up a sign like that? But my amusement quickly faded. Not far behind this strange little sign were two small figures, standing at the edge of the tree line. Children. They looked like children, though dressed decades out of time. The forest had fallen eerily silent. "Hello?" I called out. There was no response. The children reached out and held each other's hands. With their free arms, they began to wave. The shadows were long and dark now, and I couldn't make out any real details. But their faces? I swear they weren't normal faces. Where there should be eyes were instead these deep, empty voids. I stepped forward. "Are you both okay? Are you hurt? Or lost?" My throat was dry and the words cracked as they came out. Their calm waves became more frantic, jerky, wrong even. Their heads snapped side to side, their movement a blur. I tried to run, but my body refused. My legs were slabs of stone, my chest crushing inwards. My mind screamed run. My heart pounded in my chest like a bird thrashing in its cage. Then they started forward. Each step rattled the air with this sickening hum, like a swarm of angry bees. Tree by agonizing tree they got closer, louder and louder. My skin prickled with icy cold sweat. The sign flashed in my mind. I had to wave. They were almost upon me. The humming had become a terrible roar. I forced my arm upwards, my joints stiff as if rusted shut. It felt too slow, too weak. I shut my eyes tight and waited for the end. But it didn't come. I dared a sliver of vision to see one of them, mid-lunge, mere feet away. Its face was a blur. My arm was raised, offering the meekest, most pathetic wave I have ever given. But it was enough. I felt the tension in the air snap. Both figures stilled, then softened. Using this opportunity, I stumbled back to the road, never taking my eyes off them, always waving. I got to my car and I fumbled for my keys and dropped them. Cursing, I blindly scrambled for them across the floor, all whilst forcing my hand to keep up that pitiful wave. The sun was almost gone. Finally, I unlocked the door, bolted inside, slammed the door shut, and locked it, as though the thin metal shell would protect me. My hand was restless. I jabbed the keys in the ignition and turned. Glancing back, both creatures had moved to face me, watching, not waving. The sun dipped below the horizon with a flash of brilliant green, just as the engine roared to life. My headlights beamed, contending the darkness. But they were there. Their heads snapped towards me. The voids where their eyes should be drank the light from my car. I hit the accelerator and the car lurched forward. In the rearview mirror I saw them. More figures slipping from the tree line. 2, then 4, then dozens. The road ahead was the same. A procession of these childlike figures emerging from the woods. I slammed on the horn, but the sound seemed to die in the oppressive quiet of the woods. My hand was still waving. Speeding, I drove 40 miles per hour, then 50, then 60. But everywhere I looked, they were there. Standing, watching, a never-ending line getting closer with every bend in the road. I hit the town line and braked hard. The car screeched to a halt. The children hadn't followed. Or perhaps they couldn't. My hand finally fell to my lap, limp and numb. I sobbed at the sight of the town lights. Relief that was short-lived. I drove past the diner. A waitress was frozen mid-pour, coffee spilling over the rim of a cup. The old man she was serving pressed his face against the glass. People on the street stopped as I passed, their eyes tracking me with something. Anger? No. Disappointment. I wasn't supposed to come back, and I understood. My suspicions were right from the start. I was chosen for something, and I denied it. So I drove straight through the night, stopping only when exhaustion forced me off the road. There was a brief time where I thought that I'd actually got away. But then the humming returned. It was faint at first, easy to mistake for the sounds of modern life. A car engine idling, a plane passing overhead, a dishwasher in the kitchen. But the humming grew. It became a buzz, and then the buzzing turned into a swarm inside my own skull, louder and louder. So I waved and it stopped. So now I can't stop waving. My arms ache and my joints throb. I'm terrified of what will happen if I stop. I don't know how long I've gone without sleep. I doubt I'll last much longer. So if you see a sign asking you to wave at children, don't think about it. Don't hesitate. For your sake, just wave. Please. Wave back. It had only been 2 weeks since I moved into my new house. I never thought I'd have enough money for a cute little home with a garden like this. But luck was finally on my side, and lately, I'd been earning well. The house wasn't big, 2 small rooms, a tiny kitchen, and an even smaller bathroom, which meant the washing machine had to go in the basement, where I set up a little laundry area. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The neighborhood was quiet, too, with friendly neighbors. Most people around here had families, but even in that short time, I'd gotten along with everyone. I thought nothing could ruin this idyllic little life I had carved out for myself. That is, until the day I went down to the laundry room with a basket of dirty clothes. As I made my way down the stairs, something felt off. There was something hanging from the narrow wall between the shelves, something I didn't register at first. When I turned on the light and stepped closer, I finally realized what it was. A hand. A human hand was sticking out of the wall, only up to just before the wrist. It dangled lifelessly. A man's hand. It looked as if someone had been sealed inside the wall. Cold sweat broke out all over me. What the hell was this? There was nothing there yesterday. Was this some kind of sick joke? Should I call the police? What was I supposed to do? I panicked silently until the hand suddenly moved, as if it had sensed I was pacing back and forth. It waved at me, flailing, like someone drowning begging to be pulled out. Without thinking, I grabbed it and started pulling. It didn't budge, like it really was part of the wall. The hand started twitching violently, signaling me to stop yanking. "Are you okay?" I asked, not even knowing if I was talking to the wall or the hand. The hand just kept waving, maybe trying to say no. What was I supposed to do? How could I help someone who was somehow trapped inside my wall? Then I had an idea. I ran back upstairs and grabbed a pen and a notepad. I pressed the pen into the hand, then held the paper out in front of it. "Are you okay? How can I help you?" I asked again, louder this time just in case the person inside could hear me. The hand started writing, almost immediately. "Help," it wrote. I was pacing up and down in the basement. What the hell was I supposed to do? I called the fire department, hoping maybe they could help, but they hung up as soon as I told them there was a man's hand sticking out of my wall. I was an idiot. Maybe I should have made something up just to get them to come. Whatever. I'd handle this myself, just like I handled getting this house in the first place. I went back upstairs. I knew there had to be a hammer and chisel somewhere. The house wasn't fully furnished yet, and the kitchen still needed some renovation, so it was hard to find anything. But eventually, I found my tools. I rushed back down to the basement with them, and that's when I got the next surprise. The hand was sticking out more than before. I could now see all the way up to the man's bicep, and a little farther down the wall, just barely poking out, were the tips of another hand's fingers. 2 hands now, both coming out of the wall. I was shocked for a moment, but then quickly grabbed the tools and started chiseling around the first arm. The hands twisted in agony. They writhed like a worm cut in half. It was a horrifying sight. I immediately stopped and handed the paper to the hand again. "Are you okay? Did it hurt when I started breaking the wall? I just thought it might help to get you out faster." The hands began writing again, slowly, shakily, the letters barely legible. "Yes, please don't. Let's just wait." I didn't know if I should trust him, but I agreed. Who was this man, and how did he end up inside my wall? Some kind of experiment? What the hell was going on? I brought down a chair for myself, sat there waiting, staring at the wall, or more precisely, at the man inside it. That's when I noticed something near the bottom of the wall. A few toes were sticking out. My wall looked like someone was trying to walk out of it, just very, very slowly. What the hell was happening here? I gave up on the idea of calling for help. No one would believe me anyway. I'd deal with this on my own. Whatever it was. "What's your name? Who are you?" I asked, getting up from the chair. The hand started writing on the paper again. "My name's Jack. I don't know how I ended up here. I was just walking home from work." I eyed the hand suspiciously again. This was all too weird. How did Jack get here? And how was he even alive with most of his body trapped inside a wall? But there wasn't much I could do for him. Anything I tried caused him unbearable pain, and I couldn't help him get out any faster. I was starving by then, and I had spent nearly the whole morning down there, so I ran out to grab food from the nearby diner. I rushed faster than I ever had in my life. I didn't want to miss what might happen next with Jack and the wall. All I could think was, please, let everything be the same when I get back. But when I returned, I got another horrifying surprise. His right arm was out all the way to the shoulder. The left arm hung only to the middle of the forearm. His left leg was sticking out up to the knee, like he'd taken a step forward, but it was crooked and jerky, like it had glitched halfway out of the wall. Only the foot of his right leg had emerged. My wall looked utterly grotesque, like something from a disturbing museum exhibit. I ate my lunch down in the basement. I didn't want to miss a single moment, but whenever I was there, Jack barely moved. His hands twitched from time to time, his legs shifted occasionally, but he didn't come any further out of the wall. "Jack, are you even human?" I asked after a long silence. Jack's hands began writing again. At least by now, he could hold the notepad himself. "Of course I'm human. I don't know what the hell happened. I just want to go home, goddammit." I felt a bit sorry for the guy. How the hell could he end up in a situation like this? Did someone do this to him? Or was it something else? Watching the wall was getting pretty dull. Time crawled by slowly. That's when my doorbell rang. Someone was at my door. I hurried upstairs, hoping somehow that it might be connected to Jack. Maybe someone had come up with an explanation. But it was just my neighbor. He invited me to a backyard party for the weekend. He and his wife were hosting a little cookout with a kiddie pool, and they were inviting the other neighbors. As the new guy on the block, I was welcome too. The thought crossed my mind to mention Jack in the basement, but as soon as I was about to say something, I realized it was better to keep my mouth shut. Not exactly the best first impression to say, "Oh, by the way, I've got a half-naked man coming out of my basement wall." I'd sound like a lunatic, or a killer, or both. So I just accepted the invitation and said I'd bring something as a gift. As soon as the neighbor left, I rushed back downstairs, and thank God I hadn't said a word about Jack. His right arm was still only visible up to the shoulder, but the left was now out to the top of the elbow. His left leg was fully free, and the right hand emerged up to mid-thigh. His hips were beginning to show through the wall, and yes, so was his... I was completely shocked. A naked man was crawling out of my basement wall. What was going on? No matter how hard I tried to stay in the basement all afternoon, there were things that eventually forced me to go upstairs. One of them was a bathroom break, but I tried to take care of everything all at once. After using the toilet, I quickly made myself some dinner, and of course, in my rush, I managed to cut my finger, so I had to deal with that too, but at least it gave me an idea. I brought water and dinner down with me, and embarrassing as it is, I also brought a bucket to, do my business in. I was worried Jack might come through while I wasn't there. I also brought down a pair of pants. They were the same old ones I used when painting the house. Now I figured Jack could wear them, since the lower half was already fully exposed, and staring at a naked man wasn't exactly comfortable. Once I had all that sorted, I followed through on my idea. I had brought the kitchen knife with me, the one I'd used to slice tomatoes for dinner. I wanted to check if Jack was really human. I grabbed his right hand and gently cut into it with the knife. Didn't go deep. If he was just a regular guy, I didn't want to seriously hurt him. But there was no blood. Not a drop came out of his skin. Jack, what the hell are you? I backed away from the body sticking out of my wall. Jack just flailed his arms. He scrawled something on the paper. I'm human. I haven't hurt anyone. I don't deserve this. I didn't know who or what to believe, but one thing was clear. The knife was staying with me, and I wasn't taking my eyes off him. Unfortunately, the bucket turned out to be a bad idea. By evening, I had to use it twice. Because of that, the basement started to stink pretty badly. It wasn't exactly pleasant to sit around in that kind of smell. I ran upstairs, emptied the bucket, and used the toilet again. I did it as fast as I could, but even so, when I came back down, I was shocked. Jack was almost completely out of the wall. Only his shoulders and everything above them. His neck and entire head were still stuck inside. The old paint-stained pants I had put on him had slipped off, because Jack was shorter and slimmer than me. So once again, he stood there completely naked, like some twisted mannequin. The sight always horrified me. Whenever I came downstairs, I quickly pulled the pants back up on him, at least to cover his lower half. And once again, the doubts began to gnaw at me. Jack looked like a completely normal man. True, I still hadn't seen his face, but his body looked like that of an average man in his 30s. Still, the suspicion lingered. Why didn't he bleed? How did he get into my wall? I decided I wouldn't go back upstairs for a while. I was going to stay there, really wait until Jack came out of the wall. The evening dragged on. It got harder and harder to stay awake. I didn't even want to move from my chair. I just stared at the headless body hanging from my wall, until finally sleep overtook me. I woke up with a start, like someone who'd overslept and missed their alarm. But what really shocked me, Jack was gone. There was no body hanging from the wall, and worse, the basement door was wide open. I climbed up from the basement cautiously. I held the knife in front of me, gripping it tightly. Whatever this was, if Jack tried to attack me, I would defend myself. But nothing like that happened. The hallway was empty. The bathroom seemed empty too. It was in the kitchen where the surprise awaited me. A bald man was standing by the window in my half-finished kitchen. He was looking out, his back turned to me. He was wearing the paint-stained pants. It was Jack. "I see you've made it out, Jack," I said to him, still gripping the knife tightly, ready to strike. Jack didn't answer. He just kept staring out the window, looking into my backyard with his back to me. "If you need help, we can call someone. Or, I don't know," I continued, still trying to sound diplomatic. "They told me no one would be here," Jack said suddenly. His voice was calm, kind, and polite. "What do you mean?" I asked, confused. "Sorry," Jack said emotionlessly. No one can know where I came from. Then, without warning, Jack turned around and grabbed a knife from the kitchen counter. I just stood there stunned because Jack had no face. His head was just a smooth, pale surface. No features, no mouth, no eyes, like a freshly painted wall. I barely managed to dodge when I snapped out of it. Jack charged at me again, but this time, I didn't just stand there. I swung my knife and slashed his arm. It cut in, but it was like he didn't even feel it. There was no blood, not a single drop. Still, Jack didn't hold back either. As my knife was lodged in his arm, he grabbed his own knife and stabbed me in the side. I let out a scream of pain. But this thing, it didn't stop. He ripped the knife out of my side and came at me again. I tried to defend myself. He stabbed into that instead. I screamed again and pushed him away with all my strength. Jack pulled the knife out of my arm and then slashed me across the stomach lengthwise. At that point, I was bleeding from almost everywhere. I realized I had to run, somehow. Jack wasn't human. Shoving him, punching him, stabbing him, it didn't do anything. I tried to get out of the house, but the stabbing made it hard to move. I collapsed between the kitchen counter and the sink. Jack stood over me. That strange, faceless head stared right at me. His body was covered in blood. My blood. I thought it was over. This thing was going to kill me. Then I heard someone knocking at the door. "Neighbor, are you okay? What's all that yelling? Do you need help?" It was a man's voice. The neighbor who had invited me to the garden party. I silently thanked whatever prowess existed that he heard me screaming. But Jack didn't wait. He plunged the knife into me again. I tried to fight back, but the strength behind that blow was inhuman. He stabbed me in the gut. I screamed again, and that's when the neighbor broke down the door. Jack, like a thief caught in the act, ran. Just before I passed out, I saw him crash through the glass door to the backyard and sprint away into the night. Then everything went black. The doctors said I was incredibly lucky. If my neighbor had found me just a little later, or hadn't called the ambulance right away, I would have bled to death right there. I didn't tell the police anything. I said the attacker was wearing a mask, that I couldn't see who it was. It was better this way. They never would have believed me, that a faceless man who climbed out of my basement wall had stabbed me. I thought a lot about what Jack said while I was recovering. I had plenty of time. It took me over half a year to recover from my injuries. Who told Jack that no one would be at that house? And where did he even come from? I had a lot of questions. But one thing I was sure of, if Jack ever came back, or if someone else ever came into our world through my wall, I wouldn't be so useless next time. I wouldn't be caught off guard. Again. I'm writing this down both for peace of mind, as well as to see if anyone can help me, or is out there having a similar experience to me. Obvious disclaimer for how outlandish this story will sound, and I expect the ridicule. But if nothing else, hopefully putting this into words other than keeping it to myself will bring me some closure. I work the night shift at a moderately sized city in the Midwest, Springfield, Missouri. The name of where I work isn't important, but for the location you can imagine a town that is lively during the day and quite dead at night, especially during the weekdays. It was during one of these weekdays that I went through my usual routine of clocking off around midnight, walking through the empty parking lot to my isolated car, and driving through the empty streets on my 15 to 20 minute drive home. I was stopped and watching a red light at one of my intersections, staring at it and wondering as usual why it was taking so long to turn despite me being the only person on the road. When my eyes eventually wandered down to my driver's side mirror and the movement within it, I immediately recognized the shape of a human, about 20 to 30 feet back. initially not setting off alarm bells as I figured it was one of the many homeless people we have in the area, but the movement indicated they were heading towards my vehicle. I'm already a paranoid person as is, so stories of late-night carjackings and kidnappings began racing through my head as I made sure the doors were locked and kept the peripheral of the light in my vision, waiting and hoping it would turn green. It became apparent soon that whatever was walking towards my vehicle was humanoid in shape, but not human. As it steadily came closer, I could make out what I would describe now as a gray man, without clothes and featureless except for a pair of large, almost cartoonish eyes, but where a person's forehead would be, placed on an oblong, almost pointed head. I had heard of people going into shock before this, and imagined what it felt like, and in the moment, I still couldn't be sure if that's truly what was happening, or if I was having a mental episode and this was the start of my breakdown. Fight or flight kicked in soon after this passing thought, and my eyes shot back up at the light, still red but with all sense of warning completely lost on me. I slammed my foot on the pedal and made an effort to shoot through the intersection, quickly glancing either side of my vehicle despite knowing I was still the only car here as I passed directly through the intersection and moved on to the street ahead of me. I realized that the figure in my mirror was now running towards my car. I do not know how fast I was going at this point, as my eyes continued to dart between this thing and the road ahead of me, but assuming now that I was going maybe 50 miles per hour on this two-way street, it continued to keep up with me at pace, never faltering behind or catching up. My first instinct that had been in place this entire time was to continue to head home, but if this thing was keeping up with me, I realized I could not lead it back to where I live. I was now passing through neighborhoods and small side roads that would take me to God knows where, but once I hit the next main street, I would quickly take a right and head downtown. I know the area, and if anyone else would be out tonight, that's where they would be. I need the comfort of strangers, or the sight of anyone to help me get away from this, or make this thing go away. That's what I told myself. Once I hit the main streets, I made possibly the quickest right turn of my life and hoped the car wouldn't turn over with the sudden shift of weight. Ignoring whether or not I would have to deal with any oncoming traffic, as the seconds I would have thought this thing in my rearview mirror was worth the risk. As I feared, though, it continued to follow soon after, rounding the corner same as I, still fixated on reaching me. What was this thing even going to do? Does it have the strength to break into my car? It clearly isn't human. Maybe this thing is animalistic, and it's like a curious dog chasing a car. Once it reaches me, will that satiate its curiosity? More passing thoughts I had as I grew closer to the downtown square. Buildings and shopping centers growing taller and older, more dilapidated, more places to hide, tighter turns and narrow streets for me to get stopped in. Slowed down. Was this even a good idea? Someone ahead. Thank God I saw a person ahead. Homeless stray, a kid bar hopping, sightseeing. I could care less. I wanted to be near something other than that. I continued to speed towards them, eventually screeching to a halt as my passenger side window met their gaze. An older man stood on the sidewalk, tattered green army-style jacket, black beanie, casually smoking a cigarette as he stood still eyeing my vehicle. My mind was racing with a million thoughts. What do I even say to this guy? Is he going to think I'm crazy? Is he crazy? It's gone. The figure was no longer in my mirror. My eyes lingered on an empty street that arched over a hill, illuminated with dim lights and dotted with trees. I watched for a while, giving little care to the stranger directly outside my car, waiting to see anything. No movement. I returned my gaze to the man still stood on the sidewalk, obviously waiting for something to come of this car screeching to a halt beside him. He didn't seem to care. I didn't seem to think he would care or believe me either, and accelerated once again towards the center of town. More passing thoughts. He isn't safe. It's still out there. It was right behind you. You're a good person. Be a good person. Why is it so dark? I slammed on the brakes again, wanting to tell myself now that it was the Good Samaritan in me wanting to help that man. But it was fear that halted me. Lamp posts surrounding me now waning, gaining and losing light as if they were struggling to breathe. I looked again at the mirror, trying to locate the man that was now standing somewhere in the darkness behind me. The lights that had enveloped the hill behind me were gone, and I knew at this point it was hopeless for him. Whatever had been following me had now caught an innocent victim along its path, and yet I was selfishly relieved from the comfort of my vehicle, knowing that I had escaped that fate. My relief was soon shattered by a low, bass-filled gurgle coming from the direction of the darkness. I almost considered rolling down my window slightly to make out the sound more clearly, but my adrenaline took hold and I sped off from whatever was making that sickening noise. Whatever had become of that poor man, whatever it was doing, in my mind it occupied that thing long enough for me to use the opportunity and get home, get away from this nightmare. Leaving the downtown area didn't take long in my frantic state, and I eventually was able to convince myself through my paranoia and double take of every shadow that lined the streets that it was safe enough to make my way home. I carefully inspected the surroundings of my apartment from my vehicle before exiting, and quickly fled from the car and ran up the stairwell to my flat, expecting to hear the sound of that thing behind me chasing me or see it disappear from around a corner. Though I made it inside with no issues. I sat on my bed for what must have been hours replaying the events of the night through my head and questioning if I really was sane, but at some point the adrenaline dump left my system and I ended up passing out for the night. Which brings me to where I am now. I wish I could say that this was the end of things, but it is currently 4 p.m. and the sun has yet to rise. There are no clouds in the sky, no birds chirping or dogs barking, no neighbors arguing next door or kids running up and down the stairwell, nobody outside commuting to and from work or heading out for a family dinner. I've been watching since I woke up at around 9 a.m., already confused as to why there was nothing but pitch black coming from the curtains behind my window. I have tried calling family members, friends, messaging friends online, but I've heard nothing in response. Am I still asleep? Am I sane? Is this some kind of punishment for abandoning that man? Continuous passing thoughts that drown out the silence. The internet appears to still be working, which is how I'm posting this for anyone who happens to find and read it now. If anyone is out there, life online seems to have stopped like it has here. No messages or social media posts, or forums or news articles. Just static. Frozen. I tried eventually to lightly knock on some of the neighbors' doors to see if they're home, and with no luck. But now I don't dare go back outside. I can see them through my window as I peek through the blinds now. Below in the parking lot, 2 of them, standing outside of my car, inspecting it like a piece of alien machinery. They know I'm nearby. They know I'm alive. I don't know how long I can hide. Four years ago, I was diagnosed with end-stage liver failure. When I was younger, I drank more alcohol than water. I learned that selfishness hurt me more than anyone else ever could. Over time, I slowed down, not because I wanted to, but because partying in your 30s with college kids, as Freddie put it, just isn't a good look. The yacht parties my dad kept throwing didn't help either. Honestly, I wish I had a gambling addiction instead. At least then there was a chance of winning something. All I got was loss of time, health, and any humanity I thought I had left. My liver was so damaged that there was no chance it could heal on its own. Apparently, my eyes were so yellow it looked like I used pee as eye drops, as Freddy joked. I was losing weight rapidly too. I was immensely relieved when I found out my dad had signed me up for Heineke's Life Vault package when I was a toddler. All they needed was a blood sample. It's supposedly far superior to other organ printing hospitals, but also significantly more expensive. I guess second chances are only for those who can afford them. My doctor explained that while traditional transplants always carry a risk of rejection, Heineke's printed organs supposedly have a 100% success rate. They also promise the healthiest possible version of each organ. I called in for a transplant and was scheduled immediately. When I arrived a few weeks later, the facility felt more like a luxury hotel than a hospital, aside from the ever-present sterile smell in the stagnant air. The waiting room was quiet and cozy. I waited only a few minutes before a young Asian girl entered. She had short black hair and wore high-end designer clothing. She dropped into the chair like she was visiting a friend's house. She kept rubbing her left eye, which was covered by a surgical eye patch. I kept some distance between us in case whatever she had was contagious. Eventually, a nurse approached me. "Hello, welcome to Heinekie. May I have your name?" "Adam Jones." Of course, this is an alias. Given the nature of this event, sharing my real name would be unwise. "Alright, Mr. James. You're on the Life Vault plan. Please follow me so we can get you changed into your hospital gown." The click of her heels echoed through the empty hall with each step. With the awkward silence, I couldn't help but admire the polished dark wood floor, and the walls painted a warm tan. The sterile scent only grew stronger as we walked. The nurse led me to a small changing room. I swapped my expensive, rumpled suit I'd slept in for a few days for a surprisingly soft gown. The gown didn't come with slippers, leaving my bare feet to press against the cold floor. Each step felt like walking on ice. When I looked into the mirror, it was hard to recognize myself. My eyes were piss yellow, my face and stomach thin. My hair that I'd kept clean and short was greasy and disheveled. I hardly had the energy to get out of bed most days. Forget showering or shaving. I was hopeful that this surgery would give me the motivation I needed to get my life back. "Would you like us to have this cleaned for you?" She held it out with both hands as if the suit was radioactive. "Sure," I said. I couldn't blame her. It was filthy, and I had been too exhausted to change. "Of course. Please follow me to your room." She sealed the suit in a clear garment bag and led the way. Halfway down the hall, we were stopped at an intersection by two male nurses pulling a cart carrying a large red container about the size of a coffin. The shorter of the two men paused for a moment to look at his clipboard. As he scanned the page, a soft thud came from the container. He looked fearfully at the other nurse, who swiftly grabbed the handle of the cart and pulled it down the hallway, walking as fast as he could without running. The shorter nurse scrambled to follow him, throwing a nervous glance at me. I gazed down the hall they had come from and noticed a door labeled "Spare Room." It was the only one with a badge scanner. I could see a red light glowing from under the door. Curiosity tugged at me. "What's in there?" I asked. The nurse looked briefly toward the door, clearly shaken by what just transpired. "Oh," she laughed nervously. "That's just the spare room. We store emergency equipment and replacement supplies there. Now, please follow me. We've almost reached your room." As we walked, I couldn't stop thinking about that room. I glanced back. The red light was gone. But my interest wasn't. When we reached my room, I noticed it had the same ID scanner as the spare room door from earlier. The nurse swiped the card hanging from her neck, and the door clicked open. When I entered the room, I was genuinely surprised. I've stayed in hotel rooms far less luxurious than this. The bed was all white, The room dimly lit and stylishly modern. Gray leather couches, a dark marble coffee table, a door to my own restroom, a huge flat-screen TV, and even a sleek mini-fridge humming quietly in the corner. This is where you'll stay while you're being treated. The duration depends on how your body responds. You're free to leave the building, but we strongly recommend you don't, especially before and after the surgery. Please make yourself at home. I'll go call your surgeon. Naturally, I checked the fridge first. It was stocked with soft foods, applesauce, pudding, protein shakes, and an assortment of jelly. I took a cherry jelly cup and a plastic spoon, sat on the couch, and took my first bite of real food in days. You know you're at rock bottom when jelly is the most nutritious thing you've eaten in a week. The translucent jelly glowed an unnatural red under the warmth of the overhead light. It brought back the memory of the light seeping from beneath the spare room door. I decided to go take a look around the hospital, but when I made my way over to the door and turned the handle, it didn't budge. It was locked. A short while later, a man in a white coat knocked and entered, leaving the door open. "Good evening, Mr. Jones. I'm Dr. Matthew Ross, and I'll be performing your surgery. But first I need to explain your situation. Your body shows clear signs of decompensated cirrhosis. But luckily there's still plenty of time to prepare. Your new liver will be ready soon. Until then, please do not eat anything for the next 8 hours to avoid complications. Your surgery is scheduled for 10 p.m. Also, please don't leave this room. We'll need to be able to reach you in case of an emergency. Do you have any questions?" "Yes. Why is my door locked?" Dr. Ross pulled a key card from his coat pocket. "This is my access card. It gives staff access to any door within their clearance level. We keep certain doors locked to prevent patients from wandering while undergoing treatment. Surgery can be stressful, and sometimes patients get disoriented and start walking around. Our building is huge, full of winding halls and identical rooms. If someone has a medical emergency and they're not in the right room, we might not be able to reach them in time. Of course, you're free to use the restroom that is attached to your room, and you can leave the facility at any time. Just let us know so someone can escort you safely. Any other questions?" "Yeah, that makes sense. Actually, I do have another one. Where exactly does the liver come from, and why is it supposed to be better than the organs from other hospitals?" I didn't actually care for the answers. I just needed a distraction. "The liver is actually grown from your own blood. When you were a child, your parents enrolled you in our plan. Unlike most hospitals that freeze blood and grow organs only when needed in a womb-like environment, we grow all vital organs immediately after receiving the sample. Maintaining them is extremely expensive, but there are benefits. Your body accepts the organ as if it's always been there." "What do you mean by accepting? Does the body try to refuse organs?" I asked while slowly walking over to the empty jelly cup. The doctor paused. "Yes, traditional organ transplant rejections are fairly common. The immune system doesn't recognize the organ and attacks it. Ours don't have that risk, which is what sets us apart from other organ printing companies." "But if they can freeze blood, why don't you guys just freeze organs too? That way you can thaw them when needed." I took the jelly cup's aluminum seal off the table. The surgeon smiled and said, "That is a great idea. Blood cells frozen for many years could lead to DNA damage. So other companies run that risk. To reduce this risk, they split the blood into multiple vials, since it doesn't take much blood to start the organ growing process. However, organs are much larger and a lot more complex. Freezing and thawing will almost always result in the organ being damaged severely. Preserving it in a false body apparatus keeps the organ growing and healthy without the need of freezing." I was still a bit confused, but I think I got the gist. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. One last thing if you don't mind. While I was in the bathroom, the faucet wasn't working. Could you please take a look at it?" The doctor hesitated. Sure, but I'm not exactly handy. If there's a problem, I'll call for assistance. He set his clipboard on the table and walked into the restroom. The moment he left my view, I moved quickly and quietly to the door, stuffing the aluminum cover over the slot where the door lock would go into. It seems to be working fine. I quickly went back to where I was standing, Dr. Ross's voice becoming louder as he left the bathroom. If you have any more issues with the faucet, just press on the remote near your bedside and a nurse will be with you right away. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your help, Dr. Ross. I tried for a polite smile, but it came off as condescending. His own smile faltered a bit. You're very welcome. I'm glad I could help. I'll get everything ready for the procedure. Please enjoy your stay. He left and I was alone again. Bored of endless scrolling through streaming services, I sat in silence, waiting for the coast to clear. Eventually, I decided it was safe to leave. I had to know what the source of that red light was, and what made that noise from inside the container. I got up and turned the door handle slowly, careful to not make noise. The hallways were just as empty as before, but without the nurse's rhythmic steps. I wandered through the repeating hallways. The only indication that I wasn't going in circles were the room number signs. While I was walking around trying to find the red room, a nurse walking backwards with an empty cart bumped into me. They were the nurses from before. I instantly noticed his ID card clipped onto his pants pocket. I could barely make out the name, Reginald. Oh, I'm so sorry. He paused, his eyes fixed on my face, like he couldn't quite understand what he was seeing. It felt like he was scanning every inch of me. The taller nurse gave him a sharp nudge with the cart and let out a cough. The short nurse blinked in succession, then forced a smile. I'm so sorry, sir. Please return to your room and wait for your treatment. I know I'm not much to look at. I'm stricken with jaundice, skinny and sick, but you'd think a nurse would be used to it. The short nurse whispered something to the tall one, who nodded and took the cart while the other walked off in the direction they'd come from. Curious, I followed him, keeping my distance. He kept glancing over his shoulder, failing at being inconspicuous. He picked up his pace. After a final turn, he reached the spare room, pulled out a keycard, scanned it, then entered a code into the keypad. He slipped inside. Going in with him would be risky, so I thought if I hid and waited, I could try to steal his badge discreetly. So I hid behind a corner, watching the door and waiting. Only a few moments later the red light returned, and immediately after the nurse walked out, sighing a breath of relief, but quickly looked up. A jolt of panic hit me. Had he seen me? I desperately looked for a hiding place, so I crouched behind a large plant in an alcove. I was surprised that I was small enough to fit. His footsteps were quick. They drew closer, growing louder until they suddenly slowed. I held my breath, praying he didn't notice me. His footsteps stopped entirely, but after a few moments he muttered, "Get it together, man." Then his footsteps continued, completely unaware that I was there. I knew that if I was found, they'd tighten up security. Then I'd have no chance of knowing what was in that room, and I'd be mortified that I'd been found crouched half naked behind a plant like a lunatic. After a minute of silence, I sprinted to the door. Miraculously, the nurse left his card in the scanner. I looked over my shoulder to make sure no one was around, and reached for the door handle. But the closer my hand got to the metal handle, the colder the air felt around my fingers became. I hesitated for a moment, doubts crawling down my body like spiders, but curiosity pushed through, and I gently opened the door. The room was very dark and freezing. Each breath let out visible fog. It was mostly empty except for a blue-lit screen glowing softly on a podium in the center. Above me, rows upon rows of large glass chambers hung like meat hooks in butcher's shops. I approached the screen. It asked for a patient's name or ID. I entered my name. Result found. I selected my profile. Name, Adam Jones. Age, 35. Sex, male. More data such as blood type, medical history, etc. were listed. On the right side of the screen was a large green button. Spare. I immediately pressed it. A second profile appeared. Spare 737-061-7265. Age 33. Organs available. All green listed except one. Liver unavailable. I felt something churn deep inside. Then I saw another button. Retrieve in bright yellow. And I, of course, pressed it. The glass chambers overhead started moving on tracks, clanking and shifting until one hovered above the center platform. Beneath it, a circular platform lit up while the chamber slowly descended, like a claw machine lowering a fragile prize. Then the glass chamber stopped. I looked closely into it. A pair of white eyes stared back at me. I froze. Terror became a dark, oozing liquid, clinging to me. The figure had long brown hair, and wore a breathing mask with a tube covering most of his face. Wires coiled around his muscular frame suspended in fluid. Curled in a fetal position, its gaze followed me no matter where I moved. Not alert, just instinctive. Infantile. Whoever this was, I had to help him. I pounded on the glass. Nothing. It was stronger than I expected. There had to be a way to open it. Hey, can you understand me? I asked the man desperately, but he stayed silent. I stared at him hoping that he would show some sort of awareness, but the longer I looked, the more familiar he became. The hair color, the eyes, the face shape. I noticed 2 small moles on the man's curled hands. I quickly turned my wrist to look for my own 2 moles. For a moment, I could not even fathom it. It was me. I jerked my head back to the terminal. The yellow button was now red. Drain and extract. Before I could press it, I heard voices approaching. I ducked into a shadowed corner. The 2 nurses stormed in, wheeling in the cart along with them with the large red container from before. You idiot! How do you forget to pull your ID from the scanner? The tall one hissed. I know, but it was that guy's fault. He got into my head. When I left the room, I swear I thought I saw him again at the end of the hallway, so quickly I ran to catch him, but no one was there. The 2 froze when their eyes locked onto the tank. You forgot to put back the spare? I did, I swear. There must have been a glitch or something. I couldn't tell if he was stuttering from the cold or from anxiety. The tall nurse crossed his arms and took a deep breath. You forgot your keycard and blamed it on a hallucination. Then you didn't return the spare, and you expect me to believe there was a glitch? He finished, nearly shouting. Yes, I know how this looks, but please don't tell Carla. She'll kill me. I swear this won't happen again, he said, pleadingly. The tall one's anger dissipated, melting into sympathy. Fine. The system automatically tells her when spares are retrieved, but not by whom. I'll say I retrieved the spare 3 times. I'll make up a dumb reason. But you tell her about bumping into the patient and the keycard. The short nurse nodded rapidly, eyes full of tears. The tall man pressed a button, returning the man in the chamber to its place. The tall man sighed. All right, which one is next? He said, his breath turning to fog in the freezing room. The shorter nurse wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and pulled out a clipboard from the cart. The short nurse cleared his throat. Tammy Warren. ID number is... Female, 24. Severe eye damage. Another one? There have been so many eye replacements recently. Is there disease or something to worry about? The tall man spoke as he typed on the screen. It looks like one eye is already unavailable. Is the patient sick? The capsules moved again. No, I looked into it. Almost 90% of the eyes we remove from patients have the same strange residue on them. It's caused by this new hallucinogenic on the market. Eye candy. Apparently, because new organs are more accessible than ever, people have started experimenting with it. It causes extremely vivid hallucinations, but almost always destroys the eyes. The worst part is, the people who get a transplant after wrecking their vision almost always relapse. But unlike necessary organs, eyes don't need to be put into the spares to acclimate. He finished speaking when a new capsule lowered. It contained a young Asian girl, her hair black and shiny, swirling around her like a cocoon. The taller man shook his head. Those damn junkies. You'd think having a second chance would stop them from self-destruction. What if something happened to the meat fridges? Has the thought never crossed their minds? They're taking their organs for granted. He spat. After a few moments of silent scribbling on the clipboard, the taller nurse spoke again. "Alright, get the cart ready. I'll drain and extract." He tapped on the screen again. This time the whole room lit up deep red, like a photographer's dark room. My stomach dropped. They'll see me. The chamber drained of liquid. The girl descended slowly until her frail, naked body met the floor. She laid there, motionless, as the chamber glass slid to the side, granting access to their meat fridge. The short nurse gave a button at the side of the cart a long press, lowering it until the top reached his ankle. "All right," he said. "Like usual. I'll get the hands and you get the legs," the taller man ordered. The shorter man stretched his back and bent down to pick up the girl's legs and drop them. "Damn, sorry. She's slippery." The taller man took a deep, steadying breath and patiently held on to her arms, used to his partner's incompetence. The shorter nurse grabbed a towel from the cart and wiped her legs dry. "Sorry," he muttered again. The two men slowly picked her up and placed her gently onto the red container. There wasn't even the faintest trace of resistance in the girl. She was more corpse than human. Just looking at her turned my stomach. I had to get out of there, and fast. The tall man walked back over to the computer and pressed the screen again. "Alright, which room?" "Room 411, the short nurse said, as the empty chamber ascended back into the rafters. The two nurses left, pulling the cart behind them. The silence in the room was palpable. I rushed over to the screen and pulled up my clone's profile one last time. My index finger quickly moved to the right side, but I hovered there, shaking, above the retrieve button. They'd know it was retrieved a fourth time. Why risk it? What if I needed another organ like Tammy? Yeah, I know how bad that sounds. I mean, I could get another organ grown, but what if it's my heart and they couldn't grow it fast enough? Or what if my body rejects it? I slowly looked up at the capsules, listening for even the slightest murmur for help, but the room was a silent graveyard. I could see faint eyes watching me from all around. A few had one eye. Even fewer had both. These weren't real people, I told myself. They were storage. If I opened the capsules, they'd probably just collapse helplessly too. I held my hand reluctantly over the X icon and closed my eyes and pressed down. Maybe someone else will help them. Walking out of that room, I'd convinced myself I couldn't, that I wouldn't even know how. Now, 4 years later, I know that was BS. I even knew it then, but I still walked away. I'm hoping that by writing this and telling the word, that someone will see this and do what I couldn't. I couldn't help them, and I can't help now. I can't go back. I can't face those lifeless eyes that I left behind. I still remember those eyes as I reach for another bottle. I can't tell this story to anyone, but I need to get it off my chest. So I will write it here. Names have been changed. It all started in 1996. My parents had just bought our first home computer, one of those bulky machines that sat in the living room for the whole family to use. On the rare occasion that my parents weren't around, I would turn it on and scour the internet for things little children aren't supposed to mess with. One afternoon, my dad was at work and my mom ran to the shop, leaving me alone for just a few minutes. I typed www.death.com into the search bar. I often made up creepy website names. I was a curious child and I wanted to educate myself on the things adults were afraid to talk about. The website that popped up was a gloomy page, featuring the drawing of a skeleton in a black cape. It read, "Do you want to know when you will die?" It prompted me to enter my name and date of birth. I did, then clicked on submit. As soon as the new window opened, I instinctively closed my eyes. Did I really want to know when I would die? No, I didn't. Did I believe that a scary website could actually know the date of my death? No, I didn't, but you never know. I nearly jumped out of my skin when I heard Mom's keys turning in the lock. Mom would be furious if she knew what I was up to. She thought I only dealt in stuffed animals and Disney princesses. I grabbed the mouse and darted toward the little X in the top right corner of the window. In the process, I stole a quick, furtive glance. A tiny glance. But I saw it all right. August 21st, 2022 at 12:05 a.m. In the years that followed, I lived my life without ever thinking about that stupid website again. Did I, though? August 21st, 2022 at 12:05 a.m. August 21st. That date was burned into the back of my mind. It sat there like a relentless ticking clock I never dared to speak of. It only left me with 26 years, which doesn't sound too bad, but it really isn't that much when you think about it. Although I would never allow myself to acknowledge it, I rushed to achieve my goals because I secretly feared time was running out. I wrote like crazy throughout my 20s until I managed to publish a novel. It sold decently well. Seeing my creation on library shelves helped some of the anxiety subside. At least I had made my mark in the world. A small mark. I needed to keep going to make it bigger. I wrote another novel that I was convinced would become my masterpiece. It was rejected by every single editor. I had never felt so hopelessly crushed. One night, in the midst of a panic attack, I opened my laptop and went back to that website. I landed on a gray, empty page. All it said was, "This domain name is for sale." Relief rushed through me. This whole death prediction thing was a hoax from the early days of the internet, meant to attract traffic from credulous children like me. Obviously, afterwards, I developed a more relaxed disposition, but only for an extent. I still had a lot of work to do on my way to greatness, and I'd better not procrastinate. I married Tim on a bright summer day. From the moment I met him, I knew he was the one. Sweet, dependable, down to earth. As a tax accountant, he had a comfortable paycheck, great benefits, and a solid life insurance policy. Sure, he wasn't the most adventurous man in the world, but who cared? He believed in me and was happy to support me while I poured my time into my literary endeavors. August 20th, 2022 came around. You may ignore the passing of time all you want, tell yourself that a certain day is still far off, but that day will come. Yes, it will. I pretended that there was nothing special about August 20th, 2022. Still, I took some precautions. In the weeks prior, I'd put myself through a battery of medical checkups. Not that I had any symptoms. Indeed, the doctors confirmed that I was healthy as a horse. Even though August 20th was a Saturday night, I had no plans. I sat in front of the television and did not budge. Tom went upstairs at 10 p.m. He always went to bed early. I wished I could join him, but for some reason I absolutely had to finish binge-watching some meaningless Netflix show. August 21st, 2022 at 12:05 a.m. What if I die in my sleep? At 11:31 p.m., I started feeling a tingling in my nails. I wiggled my fingers. It went away. A few minutes later, it came back. As any sane person would do, I pulled out my iPhone and Googled it. None of the medical conditions associated with nail tingling could possibly apply to me. As I had already established beyond a reasonable doubt, there was nothing wrong with my body. The only condition that did match was anxiety disorder. It was 11:40 p.m. on August 20th, 2022, and I had to face it. I was really anxious to go on that website again. My fingers flew across the touch keypad, hoping to land on, "This domain is for sale." I crashed back into that old webpage from 1996. But this time, the caped skeleton was pointing at a real time clock. 11:44:01 p.m., 11:44:02 p.m. The room started spinning. The ground gave way beneath my feet. What kind of sick joke was this? That website was supposed to be down. How did it recognize me from 26 years ago? I don't use the same Google account. Google accounts didn't even exist in 1996. Wait, I wasn't being rational. What the screen was showing me was just a real-time clock. There was no actual piece of information tied to me. Most likely, the original creators of the website had brought back the domain name and decided to play a prank on anyone who had been on it back in the day. Sooner or later, someone would go on the website at an unfortunate time and get scared out of their mind. Why won't this tingling stop? I tossed my phone on the couch and went back to watching TV. I refused to be intimidated by such nonsense, but I could not understand anything the characters on the screen were saying. I glanced at my nails. They looked a bit dark. Had they always looked this way? Almost without thinking, my hand grabbed the phone again. I checked the time. 11:48:05 p.m. So what? I told myself. This is a night like any other night. It will pass and the sun will rise and the darkness will be forgotten. I shot up from the couch. What was that? The doorbell. Just the doorbell. Our house was pretty isolated, but every now and then, bored teenagers would bike out to the edge of town and ring random doorbells for kicks. I looked through the peephole. Just the dark, empty street. I unlocked the door. Maybe I could catch them, give them a good scolding. As I pushed the door open, a gust of icy wind slithered inside, engulfing me in cold, lonely despair. I slammed the door shut and backed away into the warmth of my home. The doorbell again. "Go away," I shouted. I strained to hear anything outside. Nothing. No giggling, no footsteps, no bike wheels turning, just dead silence. August 21st, 2022, at 12:05 a.m. I looked through the peephole. I screamed, but the scream didn't come out. It turned inward, digging into my lungs. As I stood there breathless, my mouth agape like the corpse of a hanging man. Outside my door was the skeleton in a black cape, its unnatural grin and hollow eyes boring into me through the peephole. I scrambled back to the couch, snatched up my phone, dialed 911 and started jabbering. "Help, someone's at my door, trying to get in. Help, they want to hurt me." Then I realized that the call hadn't gone through. I had no reception. 0 bars. In fact, the reception symbol was gone altogether. Suddenly the phone fell from my hands. I had finally noticed it. My nails, black, broken, rotten. August 21st, 2022 at 12:05 a.m. It was real. It was always real. I lunged at my phone. Thankfully, it was still intact. I opened the browser and went back to the website. 11:54:58 p.m. Doorbell again. My heart jumped into my throat. It tasted like blood. 11 minutes to go. I took a deep, trembling breath. I was a smart woman. There had to be something I could do to save myself. Every problem has a solution, doesn't it? I brought my phone closer to my face, scanning every inch of the web page, looking for a clue, a loophole, some guidance from the devil himself. There it was at the very bottom of the page, almost invisible. Contact. I slammed my phone down. A chat window popped up. Sleepy friend. Hi, Suzanne. It knew my name. At this point, I wasn't even surprised. Sleepy friend. Congratulations on your upcoming death. How can we help today? I don't want to die. How can we help today? I don't want to die. Please make it go away. Sleepy friend is typing. My eyes snapped to the timer. 11:58:31 p.m. Come on, I had no time to waste. Sleepy friend. We understand that you requested a personal death prediction on October 13th, 1996. We are proud to say our predictions are 100% accurate. I don't care. I don't want to die. We understand that you requested a personal death prediction on June 13th, 1996. It was a mistake. Sleepy friend is typing. 12 a.m. My limbs were curling up, tightening into a sort of rigor mortis. Sleepy friend. I see. Don't worry, Suzanne. All mortals make mistakes. We proudly implement a near unlimited satisfaction guarantee. My body relaxed a little bit. Maybe there was a way out of this nightmare. So I'm not gonna die? Is the monster going away? Sleepy friend is typing. 12:02, 10 a.m. Me. Am I safe or not? Sleepy friend. However, since our operator has already reached your address, and the scheduled pickup is less than 3 minutes away, it is against company policy to send him back without a retrieval. What does that mean? You said satisfaction guarantee. 12:03:02 a.m. We are happy to accommodate our customers in any way we can. You are welcome to enter the personal information of an alternative subject. First name, last name, date of birth. What do you mean? Our operator has already reached your address. It is against company policy to send him back without a retrieval. You are welcome to enter the personal information of an alternative subject. First name, last name, date of birth. I tried to swallow, but my saliva had thickened into gravel. He was content with his life. He had lived a good life. Would growing old and sick make him any happier? Probably not. Sure, he was a competent tax accountant. There were thousands others like him. Did the world need more tax filings from him specifically? Not really. 12:04:23 a.m. I, on the other hand, had important work to do. I was creative. I was unique. My new novel was coming along nicely. It just needed time to mature. Time. 12:04:51 a.m. I brutally silenced my thoughts. Like a machine, I typed hard and fast. Tim's first name, middle name, last name, date of birth. 12:05 a.m. I held my breath, eyes fixed on the front door, waiting for the horror to come through. Ding. I jumped. It wasn't the doorbell, just a notification. Sleepy friend had responded. Thank you, Suzanne. The team wishes you a long and happy life. Sleepy friend has exited the chat. That was it. The timer ticked on peacefully. 12:05:59 a.m. 12:06 a.m. 12:06:01 a.m. And I was still alive. I looked down at my nails. To my immense relief, they looked perfectly normal. The thought occurred to me that perhaps they had always looked normal. Maybe the fear, bottled up for 26 years, had made me hallucinate. With newly found courage, I walked to the front door and peered through the peephole. Only the empty streets. For the first time that night, I suddenly felt clear-minded. It was like I had just woken up from a bad dream into an ordinary, reassuring reality. It had all been an elaborate prank, and a very tasteless one at that. I don't know how they pulled it off, but after a good night's sleep, I would figure it out. Swoosh. As I turned around, the hairs at the back of my neck stood up. The caped figure was gliding down the stairs behind me. Its bony grin flashed in the dim light. My legs were two pillars of stone. I stood still as the figure breezed right past me. The front door swung open in its wake. The figure blended into the night. In the blink of an eye, the door was closed again. I picked up the phone and dialed 911. I did not bother checking the bedroom. I knew what I would find. I buried my husband Tim 3 years ago. He died of a heart attack. Surprising for a man in his 30s, but not so surprising considering both his father and uncle suffered from heart problems. He is sorely missed. As the wonderful provider that he was, he left me with enough money to support myself while I write full-time. I still haven't finished my masterpiece. I am so close, but something always holds me back. Some days I can't focus on my manuscript for more than a few seconds at a time. I keep thinking that I might be about to die, and the panic makes my brain go haywire. Other days, I simply stare at the wall, drenched in the weight of this never-ending existence. I think the uncertainty is killing me. Maybe if I knew what to expect, maybe then I would feel motivated again. I did check the website. It looks exactly as it did in 1996. Do you want to know when you will die? First name, last name, date of birth. Enter. Should I do it? Have you spent years of your life with someone just to find out none of it was real? I had met Andrew when I was 22, working as a bartender for a crappy hole-in-the-wall bar. He was an incredibly outgoing individual that effortlessly brightened the day of anyone who was within 15 feet of him. He had made the lonely closing shift of a dead Tuesday enjoyable, and after I got off work we met up for coffee and waffles at a nearby diner. The chemistry we had was unlike anything I had ever experienced before, and it wasn't long before we began dating. Andrew became my rock that I could always rely on to keep me grounded when the rest of the world was caught up in a squall of chaos. He embraced my love of B-horror movies, and I accepted his enthusiasm for the outdoors after weeks of convincing on his part. Andrew was the life of the party, and while there were times that I just wanted to stay in and binge slasher movies, he would tease me for being a homebody and drag me out of the house to meet up with one of his never-ending swaths of social circles for bowling, laser tag, house parties, or his absolute favorite, the late-night hike through the forest that stood behind the crappy bar I had worked at when we met. It had been a major milestone for me when I quit the bar 6 months after Andrew and I met. With his support and encouragement, I started my own business in a niche field that I was actually passionate about. While the money isn't best, I love the work I do, and even the worst days are still better than having to mop up bodily waste from someone who had too much to drink. At a 40th anniversary showing of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, Andrew proposed to me during the Damn It Janet scene. His collection of friends who had grown on me fast and became my friends as well, hooted and cheered for us and took out for celebratory drinks after the show. Since that chance encounter 2 years previously, my life had become my own personal heaven. The work I did now was fulfilling. I had an amazing new group of friends, and I was now engaged to the best man I had ever met. Hey, I found the perfect place we should go for a nice picnic and hike, Andrew told me as I was grabbing the last load of laundry from the ancient dryer in Andrew's basement. I was hoping that we could just stay in for the day, Andy. Since I moved in, it feels like we have been going non-stop. I replied, tired but not annoyed at the suggestion. After his proposal, I moved into Andrew's 2-bedroom house. It was quaint, but there always seemed to be another little project that needed to be tackled. With both of our work schedules, there never seemed to be enough time in the day to fix all of the little quirks the house had. "Oh, come on, Christy," he said, wrapping his arms around me and giving the side of my neck a kiss. "Wouldn't it be nice to actually enjoy the 3-day weekend we have to actually get out and have some personal time together?" I moaned as his soft lips and blonde facial hair brushed against the side of my neck. "Alright, I guess it would be nice to spend time together. Just the two of us." Despite moving in together, we hardly had any time to ourselves. The mass of friends were constantly inviting us over and out to celebrate the engagement and to offer help with planning the wedding. It had left us little time to ourselves, and the chance to be alone in nature would be nice. The place we are going to has a nice little spring with a few nooks and crannies out of sight from the main trails, Andrew informed me as he hurriedly threw supplies into his hiking bag. The mischievous look on his face made my face redden. "Andy, you naughty boy," I said before playfully swatting at his butt. He returned the gesture with a pinch of my own butt before tossing the bag over his shoulder and nearly dragging me to the car. During the 3-hour drive to the national park that we would be hiking through, I had dozed off. As we finally arrived, Andrew woke me with an excited expression. "Here we are, miles and miles of trails, a chance to really connect with nature." He beamed with a smile that brought one to my own face. "Where did you even hear about this place?" I asked, shaking the last of sleep from my eyes before sitting forward. "Sam and Frankie were telling us about it the last time we went bowling. Don't you remember?" "Not really. With all of the friends we have and ideas tossed around, it's hard to keep track of everything." "Lucky for you, I have a steel cage for a mind," he responded, lightly tapping his temple with a finger. "More like a rusty bear trap." I teased as I mocked a rusty trap closing with my hands. We shared a laugh before he parked and we set out for our hike. Andrew had planned a long trek that would bring us back to the car a little before dark. I was glad I had worn an old outfit that I wouldn't have to worry about getting covered in mud. When I asked about who would be doing the driving back home after we hiked all day, and he eased my worry with the promise of a stay at a motel we had passed 20 minutes before we arrived. A place I would have seen had I not fallen asleep. With satisfaction at his call ahead and carefully laid plans, we set off into the forest for our day of just the two of us. "Isn't that the same outfit you wore when we met?" Andrew asked, his eyes feasting up and down on my body. "Yeah, I thought I'd just throw on some old clothes, since you wanted to go on an intense hike," I replied, snapping my fingers to get his attention. We both laughed as we ventured further down the trails. An odd thing I noticed while we hiked was the strange absence of other people while we hiked. "I thought you wanted time together, not with a horde of others," Andrew said as we stopped at the top of a cliff with an old picnic table for people to rest before beginning their descent towards the spring. "Of course I want time without a ton of other people. I just think it's strange that we haven't seen anyone else while we have been here. I mean, it is a holiday weekend. You would think we would have passed by some other wilderness enthusiast or gun-ho parents dragging their kids along to get away from technology for once in their life." "This is a pretty big place. We probably have passed by others but just didn't notice them," Andrew said as he sat his bag down on the table and stretched his arms. I smiled as he took off his shirt and stretched his taut form. I took a few steps towards him and gave him a peck before I spoke again. "Take a picture with me," I said, leaning against him and fishing my phone from my pocket. As he wrapped an arm around me, I lifted the phone up and took a picture of us. As I went to take another, a large buck jumped out from behind a nearby tree, startling us both. In slow motion, I watched as my phone leapt from my hands and down the cliffside to the unwelcoming arms below. With a faint crack from below, I could feel my heart drop to my stomach. I dropped my phone. That stupid deer made me drop my phone. Dang it, I could kill that thing. I yelled out in frustration. Whoa there, I think you might have broken a commandment there, Andrew said, placing a hand on my shoulder. I'm glad you think this is a joke, Andrew. I'm not trying to make a joke of it. I'm sure you will be able to recover any photos that are on your phone. Plus, it was old anyways. I'm pretty sure you have had the same phone since we met. I know you've been wanting to upgrade for a while, but haven't really had a chance. He said as diplomatically as he could. We made our way down to where we were sure the phone had fallen, and luckily we were able to find it. The phone had dived straight into the soft embrace of rocks and branches, and the shattered screen was more than enough evidence of how useless it would be. Andrew pulled a plastic bag that had once contained trail mix, and placed the destroyed phone inside before stashing it away in his hiking bag. First thing tomorrow, we will go and get you a brand new phone, the best one they got, even if it means I gotta sell a kidney to get it for you, Andrew said, trying to cheer me up, obviously aware of my disappointment at losing my collection of memories of our life together that had been gathered on my phone. We continued on towards the springs, crossing over an old wooden bridge that creaked and groaned with every step as we crossed over it. The entirety of the short time we spent crossing it, my whole body was on edge at the overwhelming sensation of the bridge threatening to collapse at any moment. With the momentary hazard past, we found our way to a pleasant spring resting beside a cliffside. The gurgle of water leaking out and falling down onto the rocks below created a serene background besides the rustling wind and crunching of leaves and twigs as we approached it. Leaning forward, Andrew cupped his hand and brought a handful of spring water towards his mouth before sipping at it. Are you sure you should be drinking that? I asked, thinking about what things could be contained in that water. You drink spring water that's bottled with millions of microplastics in it. At least this is straight from the source, Andrew said as he splashed his face with the spring water. You know, there is a little overhang here that we could... Andrew trailed off as he made a gesture with his hands. I'm not really feeling up to it. I'm still irritated about dropping my phone and don't think I'm in the right headspace for that, I said, noticing a momentary flash of rage across Andrew's face before it shifted to an understanding look of disappointment. Well, you should at least try this water. He gestured to the water as he spoke before glancing absently in the distance. I tried a small sip of the water and the taste was heavy with a strange metallic taste. Just before I was about to comment, Andrew was already stepping off towards the trail. When we approached another bridge, I insisted that Andrew lead the way as it spanked across a rather steep decline. After he proved the structural integrity of it, I began crossing for myself. Just as I made it halfway through, a horrid crack from the wood echoed through the air. As I fell through the bridge, my hand stretched out to catch myself. The nails of my left hand dug into the wood before being ripped out as my weight jerked my body below. In the briefest of moments, I looked out towards Andrew. A malicious smile greeted me as I tumbled towards the earth below and was embraced by darkness. As I regained consciousness, I was greeted with the sight of a stag's skull wrapping its long tongue around the bleeding fingers of my left hand. I screamed out in terror, only to be greeted with Andrew's worried face gracefully holding my bandaged left hand. Thank God you're okay, Andrew said, slowly setting my hand down and helping me sit forward. My clothes caked in dirt and a long tear down the right side of my jeans with scrapes and cuts, leading to the missing shoe on my right foot. I tried to reply, but he hushed me to conserve my energy. He told me he was going to climb back up and try to call for help as he didn't have any signal where we were. I tried to beg him to help me back up, but he was already walking away before I could form the words. I raised my undamaged hand to my head and was greeted with a sharp pain on the side of my head and a small wet patch of blood. Panic racing throughout my body, I forced myself to my feet. It felt like hours since Andrew had gone off for help, and it was now well into the night. I stumbled my way through the overgrowth and began my slow ascent up the hillside back towards the trail. Upon finally reaching the trail, surrounded in the darkness of night, I looked around for any trace of Andrew, only to be greeted by silence. The sound of wind or wildlife were missing, and the only audible noise was my labored breathing and rapid heartbeat drumming in my ears. Dragging my way back to the spring, I greedily drank from the water, ignoring the odd aftertaste. Glancing at a small pool of water at my feet, the shadowy reflection I saw was a skeletal form of myself. I turned away as tears filled my eyes. Pain rippled through my body as I shambled through the dark, my head swimming as my vision blurred. "Christy, where are you?" Andrew yelled out in the distance before he rounded a corner, coming into view. Calling out for me in Andrew's voice was an 8-foot monster, legs bent backwards connected to a skeletal torso, draped in baggy flesh that stretched and shifted to attempt to mimic the human form. The swollen and bulbous head had 2 antlers poked out as the mouth of broken teeth clattered together in an attempt to form a smile. As the thing hunched over to greet me, I was stunned into silent horror as the beast with Andrew's voice reached out to me. "You had me so worried," the familiar voice struggled to say through gnarled teeth, as charred hands wrapped around my wrists. I yanked my hands back as adrenaline scattered my body away from the demented form. I ran away, heart pounding, panic and tears blurring my vision almost as much as the leaves and branches that smacked my face as I escaped in a direction that I hoped would lead to freedom. Atop the cliffside, where I had dropped my phone, I paused long enough to catch my breath. Leaning against the picnic table was an old metal trekking pole with electrical tape wrapped around the worn-out handle. I grabbed the ancient hiking stick and leaned against it before starting back out of the forest when Andrew pulled himself over the cliffside. Without thinking, I brought the brass mud tip of the pole down onto Andrew's amorphous face, knocking a chunk of fleshy clay off in the process. Andrew dropped to his knees with flakes of ash rising from his body. The blob of his head formed into a grainy recreation of the face I had stared into for countless hours since we met at the bar all those years ago. "I love you," spoken to me in a voice similar to that of an animal, mimicking the words of a person. Smoke rose from the missing chunk in his head before his body fell into a confusing blend of shapes that I couldn't decipher. Tears streaming from my eyes, I turned away from my fiancé and fled from the forest around me. As I shuffled past the edge of the forest, I was greeted with the familiar sight of the bar I had met Andrew at so long ago. A small group of people smoking outside noticed me immediately and rushed over to me as I collapsed. The last of the adrenaline spent as safety from my living nightmare finally embraced me. I had been missing for 10 years. On the magical nights I had met Andrew and thought I had begun an amazing life with my soulmate, I had, in reality, closed the bar after an empty night and walked directly into the forest behind the bar in a trance-like state. When my car was found the following morning by the bar owner, she called my phone to see if I was having car troubles the night before. When I didn't answer, she checked the security footage to find me walking off into the forest. Her concern heightened as the grainy video displayed a strange shadow figure at the edge of the trees, seemingly luring me towards it. For 6 months they searched the forest only to find my damaged phone and my lost shoe. The worst was assumed, and my missing persons poster had circulated the state, but after all these years, I was assumed dead. Miraculously, I had somehow survived, vastly malnourished at 70 pounds. Patches of hair missing, several poorly healed scars littered my body, the worst of which were the scars around my wrists and ankles that reminded me too much of rope burn scars. The implications as terrifying as the monstrous forms Andrew had taken. there had never been an Andrew. I try to tell myself that every day, but I still have all of these amazing memories of someone who truly loved me, and all of the memories we created together with friends. When I have explained the memories I have of the time since I left the bar all those years ago, I have been told it was my mind trying to protect itself, creating an imaginary world where everything was perfect to shield me from the hell I was actually living. Even as those memories begin to fade and I accept the reality that there never was an Andrew, I still miss him. I loved Andrew. He was my soulmate. When I wake up drenched in sweat from the night terrors of that final hike, one thought still lingers. What would have happened had I continued the fantasy with Andrew? Would I have ever escaped? Or would I still be lost in the forest?